Is it started? Because first I'd like to say, welcome everybody and good morning. A standing room only crowd, I must point out. Thank you everybody for being here today. My name is Bill Culliford and I'm the Executive Director and founder of webprofessionals.org and most recently the chair of the YITnow.org and the YCTE initiative, which I'll explain a little bit more about what that's all about in a minute. I'm also here with my colleague Gary Page from the California Department of Education. This morning's session is on making progress through partnerships, a case study in information technology and new media education with emphasis on a progress report, because this is still work in progress and we want to give you an update. This initiative basically that we're working on collaborative-wise is about 18, maybe 20 months old. So let's see here. Oh, okay, I can just use the arrow. So today, for those that didn't have a chance to read the session description, I'd like to just briefly go over what the premise is here today. To compete, effective partnerships must be established and strengthened. Stakeholders must come together to significantly improve secondary and post-secondary education and inspire in students a desire for lifelong learning. To that end, this session's presenters, myself and Gary, will cover key insights in developing and nurturing business and community partnerships and relationships that can have a direct impact on student outcomes, experiences, and successes. The topics will include barriers and opportunities in information technology, IT, and new media, education, keys to establishing effective partnerships, achieving desired results with emerging pathway approach, steps identifying in recruiting industry and education pathway champions, successful partnership strategies. The takeaways for today: listen, understand, and discuss collectively why an IT partnership is essential to making progress. Additionally, we'd like you to walk away with the steps that we took. When I say we, this collaboration with the YITnow.org initiative and the Department of Education here in California, and look for key concepts that you can apply to your situation. Appreciate and have an awareness of opportunities that you face, and develop a shared clarity of purpose. So, I'd like to, at this point, ask Gary Page from California Department of Education to address some of the barriers in IT and new media education partnerships as we know them today.
Thank you, Bill, and I'm excited to be here, and I'm really excited because of the opportunity we've had. I've been a government employee for about 25 years, and I've worked a lot in organization and management, and so I understand the bureaucracy. I'm not so much an educator. My wife has been an educator for 25 years, so by osmosis I have that blood in me. One of the things that has been discussed in the research is the culture of educators and how a teacher or an instructor is basically an independent contractor and very isolated. And one of the reasons we wanted to do something different is because for a long time we've been unsuccessful in making change the way we've been going at it. And when I say that, I look at our organization, other organizations, and we spend a lot of time and money making a lot of reports. But the truth is very little of that gets inside the classroom. And so when we talk about culture, we want to recognize that we're trying to impact a culture that has resisted intervention, and the doors have been closed. And we want to appreciate their perspective, and we want to encourage them to act differently. We want to develop trust with the classroom teacher. We want to develop a working partnership where we can exchange ideas and techniques and to open up. And so that takes that takes a different approach. So fundamentally, as we began to look at partnership, my role at the department is IT sector lead for the state, and so in my responsibility, we have 4 pathways, and one of the pathways is web, and I called upon Bill to be a partner. So that's really the beginning of the story, is I had a responsibility to help promote IT. I welcomed Bill and came along. But bottom line, the thing we keep coming to in terms of our purpose is that classroom teacher. And what can we do to actually impact student outcomes, understanding that we're in a budget crisis and understanding the culture of the teacher. Bureaucracy is another barrier. It's a barrier in practically every organization. We conducted a symposium at the Anza Community College this year, and part of that at the beginning was to bring together people and talk about how are things working with them. And at the community college level, one of the instructors says, what we really need to know is, when do we stop teaching something? You know, we have a curriculum, but again, we're in our classroom, we're providing instruction, and IT moves so fast. How do we know what to teach? How do we know when to stop teaching something? And so that was an interesting question. It gets to the relevancy of being successful in a competitive world environment. This book here, one of the things we discovered along our journey is little nuggets, and this was one of them. This is a book that was written not long ago. It's about what top executives must know to go from pain to gain. It's called IT Savvy, and the bottom line here is that IT savvy companies are 20% more profitable than their competitors. And so that's the value proposition for us to say, if we want companies in America that are more successful, more profitable, then they need to be IT savvy. And how do we get them there? And it starts in the classroom with education. And so, again, this is one of the things we had. Again, the barriers, bureaucracy, at the community college level, they have a student senate that helps constrain or helps you approve curriculum. In the K-12 space, we have standards. But again, part of the problem is to develop the standards and convince teachers that the standards are really something they should pay attention to.
Hey, Gary.
Yeah.
Could you please, for the audience, highlight what was the motivation or what was the reason for you to reach out to me to help you assist the state of California with the IT sector?
Yeah. For me, I guess all of us, probably most of us, sit in a cubicle. That's where I live. I live in a cubicle. And when I think about trying to have an impact statewide and really having something significant happen, you have to reach out. You have to get outside of that cubicle. And unfortunately, we have the internet. So my need was I needed someone from industry who was really smart about the IT industry. He was the executive director of the Web Professionals of the World organization, and he happened to live nearby. And so it took several calls, but I identified him as a potential partner and picked up the phone and called him. It took several attempts, got through, and he actually was waiting for the call. He says, "Where have you been? I've really been wanting to get involved." One of the big ahas for me was to understand that California is such a powerhouse, at least it has been, of IT development. And the truth is we have an organization called Skills USA where students go and they compete nationally for medals and awards. And Bill has been active at the national level every year for 8 or 9 years, and California students have been doing very poorly. And so I think Bill has told me that himself and others from California are kind of embarrassed or kind of dissatisfied with our lack of progress. So there are a lot of big companies here that, because they're Californians, because their roots are from California, they're willing to get involved and help us. But we need to have the educators too. So I needed someone from industry. I also needed someone from the classroom because I didn't have the classroom experience. And so I used SurveyMonkey to identify teachers, classroom teachers, who would be willing to work with me and advise me when I had a question. And talk about bureaucracies, they wouldn't let me have SurveyMonkey to do this kind of work. And so we have I call it subversive activity. But sometimes there's no good reason why you shouldn't be able to do something. And it may be contrary to the policy, but I just went ahead and took that extra risk, and I was able to get a hold of SurveyMonkey, and I've been able to do it again. And I find it a very effective way to communicate and to get information and to share information. So that's one of the barriers that I had to overcome.
And so I don't know if I may put something in the context. So when Gary called me to ask me to help the State of California Department of Ed with IT, my first reaction was, where have you been? I run a web professional organization, as we've said, out of Sacramento. I live in California, but 80% of my time has been spent outside of California. So it's always been my interest to support California because it's my backyard and because California never seems to call, historically. So when he called, I said, I've been waiting for your call. Terrific, I met with him, but back to the barriers, one of the first things I did was ask him, what do you want from me? And because there was such, I think, a lofty goal, if you will, of trying to bring California into a standards environment, there wasn't really a defined purpose. So I went out and reached out to a couple of my colleagues from industry, and I said, listen, the State of California Department of Ed has asked me to help support information technology, which is broader than the scope of the web profession. So many IT professionals are also web professionals, but it's much broader than that. So the first thing I did was I called a couple of my colleagues and I said, from industry, and I said, what do you think about the fact of me taking some time to help the California Department of Ed focus in on the IT sector? And the first comment was, what do they want? And I said, well, I'm not sure they know really what they want specifically. There is no cookbook for partnerships. There's no recipe for roles and responsibilities. There's no specific plan, if you will, as to how do you bring partners. I mean, people talk about partnerships, but nobody really has defined them. And so there are risks associated. So the barrier for me was, how is a professional association that's industry-based going to work with the culture of education, the bureaucracy, and define a vision and clarity of purpose with shared resources and outcomes? So it was a very complex process, and I think the reason why we want you to take a look at this case study or this progress report is because we'd like you to see this effort as maybe a model of what could take place in your city and your state. Because partnerships don't exist. I mean, people say, oh yeah, I'm a partnership with Cisco. But what does that really mean? It's a logo maybe, a link on a website. When you really net it out, what does that partnership mean? And that's really what we're trying to define, right? So I just wanted to give you that background information so you know what we were up against in terms of working with the culture. Gary, for example, has a bureaucracy. You can't just call out to a professional association and say, listen, lead this effort, because there's certain things that Gary can't do. He mentioned the SurveyMonkey. Well, technically, he went outside the box a little bit to put the survey together to study the industry. And that's how this whyitnow.org initiative came about, because as a result of Gary asking me to support the state of California, I had to take the time to read everything about the state of California. To make a long story less long, the reason we came up with Why IT Now is because even the public really aren't aware of why IT is important. And so part of our goal is to educate, advocate on behalf of information technology in the state of California, develop an initiative to support education in California. And that's why I think this partnership is so strong, and we have some positive outcomes, which we'll get into. But more about the barriers, Gary. What specifically have we faced in the last 18 months?
Well, I'd like to focus a bit more on bureaucracy because as government, we're constrained by our roles and responsibilities. And under the law, under the Constitution, we get power only as the law allows us to have power. And you know, we want to organize. We want to have job descriptions. We want to have boxes within our organization where everything is planned. And that's fine. We have those. We have the boxes, we have the reports, we have the job descriptions. But the real challenge is to set some of that aside and say, I'm not limited, I can take initiative. And I'm fortunate to have a boss that allows me to take initiative. And so it's one of the barriers or one of the constraints we have is by our own organization, our roles are sort of constrained and limited. And that can be a barrier. We've seen lots of silos in government develop, and what we try to do is to be the bridges between those silos and bring people together, and that's a challenge. And so part of the barrier is if you don't have a supportive management and you're constrained, and all you can do is, like for us, we couldn't travel. The budget says you can't travel, and so that's a constraint. It just happens to be where we're at now, but there are other ways to overcome that, and sometimes, there are just other ways to overcome that.
Let's if we can, Gary, do you want to go to the opportunities?
Sure. This is powerful. I'd have to say that we've really stood out, Bill and I, and what we've been able to accomplish apart from others, and we'll show you in a minute what we've been able to do without any special budget or funding. And we've done that, and it's kind of a magic thing that happens when you can share your perspectives. I have a very strong knowledge of government, how it works, the bureaucracy, the rules, regulations. I don't have much knowledge about how industry works, and Bill had that. And so when we come together, we can discuss and share perspectives, and we have this kind of inside-outside strategy working. So where I'm constrained in bureaucracy, like let's say we want to do a press release about an activity. You know how long it would take me to get that through my bureaucracy? A very long time. But a phone call to Bill, in 3 hours, it can be out. And so there are these things that Bill can do that I can't do. We're going to have this year the first golf classic, IT golf classic near Folsom. Do you think I, as a state worker, could create that in a short time? It just took him a few days, and he put it together like that. And that's amazing because we're gonna promote IT awareness. We're going to bring people together on a golf course. We're going to raise money to give tuition and scholarships to students. And all of this is a very positive kind of activity. But if you ask me, could I do that? I couldn't. Can he do that? In a heartbeat. And it just takes that kind of synergy in thinking.
Yeah, Gary, if I could, I'd like to jump in on the synergy. So maybe an obvious question from you would be, well, why would Bill Color for Care? Why would webprofessionals.org care? Well, for me, the synergy is that looking at the state of California, I had no idea who did what. I mean, I had no understanding of what schools offered what. Or why they even cared. So for me, collaboration with the Department of Education meant that they could. I think Gary would back me on this. I don't think even the Department of Ed knew who was offering what. I mean, they had a lot of data, but nobody really assembled the data and reported on the data. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
So part of the process was to develop a reporting mechanism that said, what schools are offering stuff? And interestingly enough, not to poke at them, but just to point the reality, when I found that data, I started making a phone call as to find out who was offering IT. What I found was pretty alarming. The reality is, at the secondary level, there's some really stellar stuff. But from an industry perspective, and from an innovation and economic perspective, we're not near where we need to be in order to float the economic engine that we know as IT and innovation, because at the end of the day, the students are not learning the skills that we in industry say they need to know. So the benefit for me from a synergy perspective was what does webprofessionals.org get out of my volunteering, basically, thousands of hours of my own time to work closely with the state of California was that at the end of the day, student outcomes improve in the classroom, and I get firsthand knowledge on who's even offering those classes in the first place. So that was a very powerful thing.
Yeah, sharing resources has been critical too. As an example, we're going to do an IT summit in Sacramento in March. And because across from me sits a consultant who's working on a contract with Carla Cherry, putting on the Education for Careers Conference, we were able to get for at no cost a room at the convention center for 85 people for a day. And so for us, you know, it's supportive of the IT sector. We're going to do a symposium, a seminar, talk about green IT, health IT, web design IT, and other things. And we're going to bring people together to do this. And without having the facilities covered, and it was just sort of like an add-on to what they were doing already, so it wasn't a major cost for them. But we didn't have any money, and we were just able to share that resource by the little piggyback onto their conference. And that allows us to begin moving forward and sending out registrations and developing the program that we wanted to see happen.
And Gary, I had one other thought too. One of the synergies, I think, for me was really an eye-opener, is that many of my colleagues within the web profession, and I have one of my colleagues here that's an educator at a community college, can back me up. We thought the web was hot, and we know the web is hot, and we say, gee, why aren't more people getting into the pipeline for web? A lot of my colleagues said, Bill, go out there and tell people that the web is the way to go. Well, that's easier said than done. You can't just walk over to the Department of Ed and say, here's my curriculum now, implement it. At the end of the day, what's been beneficial about this IT broader collaboration with Gary is I had no idea that we were so behind the eight ball, if you will, in information technology. So if information technology historically has been around for 50 years or so, the web is a new kid on the block, there was no way I could get web integrated into the classroom without an understanding of why isn't IT actually being integrated to the degree that it should be into the classroom. So as a result of that, we started, I think, methodically, and keep in mind, please, we've spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours doing an analysis. At the end of the day, if you were to hire somebody to do this, you know, like a Deloitte Touche or somebody at that level, you'd be talking about $1 million worth of study. On the back of a napkin, if you will, an analysis that we've done pro bono, really, and I have to say, credit to Gary, much of his own time and his own dime is spent on this initiative. We've come up with a couple of key findings. Can I share these nuggets? One of the key findings, I think, is that Gary introduced me to this IT savvy notion. There's a book written by a gal, Peter Wheel and Janine Ross at Harvard University. He introduced me to this title, and I thought, IT savvy, what top executives must know to go from pain to gain in information technology. As a result of that information, I picked up the phone and called Dr. Ross at Harvard University, and I said, I'd like 3 minutes of your time to do an interview. Why was that important? Because if you read this book, you'll find, and this may surprise a lot of IT professionals, you'll find that IT-savvy companies are more profitable. Guess what? However, IT companies, or those that adopt, pardon me, let me back up. Companies, even at the enterprise level, do not adopt IT at the level of the progression that IT companies would like them to adopt. In other words, we think that there is this adoption rate of IT that's off the charts. The reality is, most corporations don't even understand IT. They certainly don't understand the value proposition, and that's why this book was written, because this is quantitative, qualitative evidence that those companies that invest in IT remain and go profitable, 20% more profitable. The other thing I think we found, which is a golden nugget, which we've had the pleasure to have as a keynote speaker as a result of this collaboration, was a gal by the name of Judy Estrin that wrote a book, Closing the Innovation Gap. This gal writes in her book, she's the former CIO of Cisco, a very articulate individual that basically says that we think in this country that we're innovative. We think that because we have things like Google and Facebook and all these other organizations, iPods and so forth, that we are on the cutting edge of innovation. And of course, as you know, innovation drives our economic engine, right? Well, her premise is that we're not as innovative as we think we are. And here's some documented evidence. She did 200 interviews of IT-related innovative companies to come up with an analysis that basically, at the end of the day, said that we're not only as innovative as we think we are, but guess what? We've actually introduced technology, innovation, and globalization to a world that's got a lot of resources that are cleaning our clocks from an innovation perspective. So the bottom line is, as a result of this partnership and the synergy, we were able to reach out to the people in the know that really, in effect, I guess, if you net it out, make a business case why IT is not only important, but why students need to learn innovation and creativity in IT at the secondary and the post-secondary level.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair statement?
It is, and the message that we keep coming back to is that IT is essential for our economy and society. It's transformative, and it's critical that we are on top of the game given the flat world and the competitive markets. Another opportunity you have with a partnership is to open doors. Because I'm with the Department of Education, I have certain status or certain, stature that comes with that title, and I can call people and introduce Bill to them. And in that way, there are a lot of vendors out in the world. If you work in education, you've met a lot of vendors. And so kind of getting over that and giving confidence, we were able to introduce Bill to my boss and explain what we wanted to do and to gain his support. We gave out, so there's a number of ways where I was able to open doors for Bill, and at the same time there are a number of ways that Bill was able to open doors for me. One of them was with Andy and Monster.com. So we're into identifying where are there jobs available, and are we giving the right training to the right students at the right place. And part of that has to do with information, and Bill had a great contact with Andy at Monster, who's been working with us, supportive of our initiative, and is going to give us a report that will give us really good information. It's about a $50,000 report.
Data
that we're going to get for free. So that's a resource that, again, I haven't had a budget to do any of the things we're doing. Just had my time and initiative.
Let's go on to the, any questions so far? I know we've done a lot of talking.
Let me just get this one more opportunity. Yeah. When you have this kind of partnership, you can learn. And one of the ahas for us was that we would do things as educators. We would meet like today, but we wouldn't tell anybody about it. It was like a big secret. And so we began. We thought about what we could do to support the career tech student organizations and students who are competing. And we called it Getting the Gold. And Bill is a real good marketer, so he would come up, we would work together on a press release. And what was the press release? Getting the Gold. Leading California educators are needing to accomplish a great purpose. Now, the truth is in government, we don't think about promoting what we do or advertising. But by doing that, by marketing what you do and celebrating really the efforts you're taking to make a difference is really important. It's important when you go for the legislation for an increase in your budget. It's important in society in general when you say, yeah, the kids aren't doing as well, but we're on it. We're working. We're committed to this cause. And so we've learned through Bill that the media is an important thing that we can begin to focus in on.
Thanks, Gary. I'm glad you pointed that out, because one of the things I think, not to be critical of the government, just an observation, is that they're really good at understanding the issues. If you read their documentation, I spent months reading every state plan, the community college chancellor plan, analysis of the plan, the ICIO plan, etc. basically what I have determined is there's some really good stuff and some very smart people that have developed these plans. The key, I think, is to disseminate that information and develop strategies to implement that plan. I think that's where they fall short. And candidly, I'm not sure it's the responsibility of the Department of Ed, candidly, to implement all those plans. I believe it's the responsibility of the community, including individuals like myself that may be semi-retired, a little bit older, former information technology professionals, and the community, including business and industry and the vending community, to step to the plate and work together to develop these strategies on implementation. That's what it's going to take, in my opinion, particularly in these budgetary times, because we simply don't have the money. We can't count on, in short, the government to do all this for us anymore. It's just not going to work. It hasn't worked in the past. So with that said, our progress, Gary alluded to this, I've alluded to this a little bit, but I wanted to go through some of these bullets. I'm sorry you can't see them, but I'll read them off. One of the first things we did was to do an IT market and education research project. Let's collect all these resources, let's sit down and do an analysis. Where are the jobs? What are people saying? What are the needs of business and industry? And oh, by the way, Cisco doesn't do all the hiring. The bulk of the people that go to work for IT in this country are non-IT companies. They are hospitals, churches, schools, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things we had to do was establish a research project. The second thing we did was establish an initiative. That is to say, what is it that we want to do? Well, we came up with a moniker, whyitnow.org. Why IT? Because people really need to know. And believe it or not, small business, the bulk of the people that employ IT professionals, they don't get it. They don't get the language. They don't get the culture of IT professionals. They don't even like IT professionals, according to the survey. And they're certainly not going to hire people that they don't like. And what's the net result of that? Productivity, profitability. We know that because IT Savvy wrote a book on that. At the end of the day, why IT is an initiative to support from information technology to those consumers of technology, why we're competing with other industries in the legislature to tell them why IT now, because IT, as you know, crosses all sectors of the economy and all sectors of our educational system. Whether you're a healthcare professional, a construction professional these days, agriculture, it all depends on information technology. However, if you look at the amount of money being spent, let's take let's take California as an example. The bulk of the money for education and training is not on IT. So if we're going to get resources allocated, we need to explain to the money decision and policymakers why IT matters. And the tagline is simply jobs, innovation, and productivity. We also established a career technical education. We thought, well, gee, okay, if we're going to do a why IT now, what's the umbrella of why information technology? Well, it's career technical education. I have these cards I'd like to pass out to you. Career YCTE was a website. It's a portal, like the whyitnow.org portal. It basically has 4,000 subscribers, and it's only a year or so old. Both sites, whyitnow.org, is not only an initiative, but it's a portal for everything IT related. So if you go to YITNow or YCTE, let's take YITNow as an example. Every hour, there's an update on jobs, press releases, quotes, interviews, everything IT related in one small, nice, neat package called a portal that you can subscribe to by email or by RSS feed. This YCTE is the same. Gary, you want to cover some of these others, particularly maybe the CTSO? And the
Sure, but just to make a point, this didn't cost the government a dime, all of this website work, and it's really phenomenal, and it's just an outgrowth of the participation. Again, here we are aligning with businesses, Monster.com and others. Robert Half has been real supportive. Working with small business industry has been supportive. The Small Business Association organization, understanding that most jobs are at the small business level. Many IT professionals are self-employed. statewide events. We've focused on career tech ed. We participate in a business education resource group. It's an advisory group to the state, and we partner with community colleges and K-12 systems statewide. We came to a conclusion. How many of you know what a career tech student organization is? Have you ever heard of FFA? That would be the Future Farmers of America. And then there's DECA, there's Skills USA. Anyways, the federal government, through the Perkins funding, provides funds for these student groups to exist. And basically, it gives opportunities for students to develop skills and employability skills and to compete. And what's nice about them, and what we've come to appreciate, is they represent a network that bridges all schools in California, including community colleges. And so we initially thought we would want to develop a network of relationships, but they already exist. And so we look at them as our channel partners. And so just like with the Educating to Careers piggyback, we're going to work with the existing networks and support them because they bring together employers in industry. They bring together all of the competitions and skills that are related to classroom instruction. So they really do. I think it's a huge opportunity.
And the mentoring, right?
And the mentoring.
Which is huge, because as an initiative, we can't necessarily reach into the classroom and mentor the students, but these career technical student organizations can. And their membership's in the hundreds of thousands, right?
Yeah, and they're national. They're not just statewide, they're national.
Yeah, so a great channel partner.
And now we're doing a series of summits. We started one in Vianza, where we had Judy Estrin speak. We're following up with one in Sacramento, and then we're going to LA County Office of Education. Said they would help us with that initiative.
So a statewide initiative to focus solely on IT and new media, with the goal of putting resources into the classroom, improving outcomes for teachers and students, and at the end of the day, circling the wagon with folks in California to improve those topics. So here's the key steps. Define the mission and vision. This took us about a year to define the mission and vision and commit it to writing. You know, a lot of people talk about partnerships. Typically what that means is a logo. If you ask people, you really get directly to them and say, schools, who are your partners? They'll say, oh, we got all sorts of advisories and partners and so on. And then you start drilling into that and say, well, what specifically do you partner about? Oh, they meet with us regularly, they give us advice and so forth and so on. At the end of the day, it's usually a logo swap and a link swap on a website. What we did together on this YIT Now initiative was to specifically define the mission and the vision and commit it in writing, which is a huge commitment from a professional association perspective to get the government to commit to anything and stand behind it and support it, as Gary does, right? So committed to identify, recruit, and engage the right mix of stakeholders, discuss the alignment of goals and document your efforts, challenge each other and commit, identify, utilize, and leverage the strengths of each partner, as Gary's alluded to earlier, support the partnership's strengths and limitations, build and maintain trusting relationships, advocate and work the media. Next slide, Gary, you want to cover? We got just a few more minutes.
Sure. And so putting it into practice, starting with the pathway, this is what we did, was to say, well, we're concerned about career paths for students and helping to help them find their way to the careers that they want. And so pathways are an up-and-coming, have been around for a long time, but they continually, they're like highways, you know, you need to maintain them. And a good pathway has a lot of good trusting relationships along the way. And so we want to help develop those sequence of courses that will lead students to their career success and goals. And you do that by connecting first with people, understanding what their passions are. Then you look at the system and look for alignment in the local areas to do that. But I use the internet to search for my partner, Bill. I made contact and assessed his interest, and I secured commitment from him. And all that took initiative, and I didn't have to do it. Truth be told, I didn't have to do it. And I guess what I want to challenge you with is to be willing to take initiative and to push yourself to say, I'm not that limited, I really can. And if you need to talk to someone higher in authority and say, I'd like to do something special, would you support that? I think they're likely to support it. So take that initiative, think outside the box, look for champions that want to engage, and they are out there, and then work the way in. I'm working now with Dave Hansen and Certiport. They are a company that helps provide the certifications for students' abilities, and they want to promote student certifications in California. But I said, Dave, I'm not really willing to just throw it out there. I want you to work with me and understand what will it take to do this successfully. We found in California we weren't getting many students certified. And so we took time, we met, we did a survey to the field. They helped me develop the survey. We talked about why is it in California that students aren't getting certified. And so we asked the teachers, what can we do? Now we've got a program in place we're working where we're going to educate, we're going to take the successful teachers, their best practices, and we're going to share that with others. And so I did this working with the industry, and they were willing to help. And so it's not just sell the product, but tell me that it's successful, tell me that teachers want it. A lot of what's happened in K-12 anyways is the vendors sell to the district office, all of the materials hit the school and sit there. Well, come on. Is that helping student outcomes? I'm saying no. We need to do it different. So I'm trying to work with that community of classroom teachers and come up with solutions so that we're going to get those student outcomes that matter.
I would say we need to find more guys like Gary Page. Okay, bottom line, we must come together to improve student outcomes in the classroom, whether it's in California or nationwide. I travel, webprofessionals.org travels not only nationally but internationally. I can tell you this straight up. We are not doing a good enough job in improving student outcomes. I mean, that's not to say that there are not some very stellar individuals and organizations doing some incredibly great things. There's great examples of that. And we intend to not harp on the negative, but show, demonstrate, and feature the positive. But at the end of the day, if we're going to be competitive globally, we're going to have to come together and figure out this situation, because we are competing information technology with agriculture, with energy. These folks are entrenched, they're well funded, they get it, they're connected, and we are, as an industry, I think, disjointed, fractured, working in silos. So what we need to do, I think, collectively, business industry, come together with guys like Gary and individuals like Gary to say, how are we going to improve student outcomes in the classroom? And I don't think we have, candidly, and that's why I'm pleased to be here today speaking on behalf of not only California but the rest of the nation when it comes to the fact that we would like you to take a look at the yitnow.org website with this in mind. There's resources there that you can benefit from. There's resources for the classroom. There's interviews of folks that are authors. There's interviews of government stakeholders. There's jobs. There's press releases. There's a plethora of information on the topic of information technology. But I would invite you to take a look at it and follow along from the perspective of whether or not we can make this partnership work. Because the truth is, until we really get into the classroom and improve the pipeline of students entering into the information technology pipeline, our job will not be done. And we're a long ways away. I mean, we're inching our way closer, but for me, the successful metrics would be when several thousand people in California, from a student perspective, are into the pipeline that wouldn't have ordinarily gone into information technology, but actually got a job in information technology. That's ultimately the goal, and we'd invite you to take a look, participate if you want to, reach out to Gary and I, because we're certainly willing to help you through the process, improve your resources, and we certainly thank you for your time.
Any questions or discussion? No?
Yeah, I just want to say, I spent the last couple Mike started at ETIP at Santa Rosa Junior College, and I spent the last couple of years putting together a digital media program. And one of the first things I did was go to a conference that was in Dallas that was industry and educators coming together to talk about all this stuff to be relevant, be current, make sure that, because the industry was frustrated with the quality that was coming out of schools and sort of the lag time and keeping things current. In addition to that, I just did a presentation at 10:30 this morning about a website that we just built. We're partnering with multiple colleges, and it's all about students and employers and faculty, but it's really about students and employers finding each other. It's based on a database of career categories, specific skill sets, everything that you're talking about. And the reason why I ended up here is because one of our instructors has a networking program who saw that the whole point is this thing can be applied to any industry. So I'd be very interested to follow up with you.
Thank you for that. In fact, we're interested in this IT Innovation Summit that we talked about. We're interested in doing one in the Santa Rosa area. Okay. So maybe it's an opportunity. Really, at the end of the day, what it's about is students, faculty, school principals, policymakers within the area coming together, getting a chance to have dialogue with industry professionals about what are the skills. They obviously move very fast. What are they?
Well, so yeah.
Where are the jobs?
So that's exactly where I'm at with the digital media end of things. So we now have a program in 3D animation, digital filmmaking, digital audio, and serious game design.
Yeah.
That was very carefully put together. Now the next part is the matching getting employers engaged with the schools, so that the students and employers can find each other for internships, projects, ultimately jobs.
Hey, one closing comment that I'd like to make. If you really want to get a sense for why what we're talking about is relevant, from somebody that's done an incredibly good job of communicating it, go to the yitnow.org website and type in IT Savvy and Closing the Innovation Gap and listen to the interviews of these two doctors that have expertise in this area. Talk about the position that we're in as a country. It's was eye-opening for me. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for your comments.